There are moments in life where everything ends, quietly. Not with a scream, not with chaos, just silence. Mine happened at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was standing in the back of a luxury limousine, draped in white silk and chantilly lace. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. I was waiting for the man I thought I would spend my life with to meet me at the altar. But the car didn't stop at the church. It stopped in a rain-slicked alleyway under a flickering neon sign that read, "Voids." And that's when I found out. Julian didn't leave me. He sold me. The door of the limo didn't open gently. It was ripped away from the frame. The cold night air hit me like a physical blow. Standing there, framed by the violet glow of the neon light, was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. Luca. He didn't look at my dress. He didn't look at my tears. He looked at me like I was a ledger entry that finally balanced. "Where is Julian?" My voice was a ghost of itself. No one answered. Instead, Luca reached in, his gloved hand wrapping firmly around my upper arm. "Your fiancé has settled his debt, Sienna," he said. His voice was calm, controlled, and terrifyingly cold. I blinked, trying to make the world stop spinning. "What debt?" That's when he stepped closer, the scent of expensive cologne and rain filling the cabin. "With you." He hauled me out into the mud. The hem of my $15,000 gown soaked up the filth of the alleyway instantly. I looked around for my guards, for my family, for anyone. But the alley was empty except for Luca's men. They stood like statues in the dark, their faces partially shadowed, watching the transaction take place. I realized then that fear is contagious. My own driver didn't look back. My bodyguards had disappeared. I wasn't a bride anymore. I was a payment. I looked up at the Voids sign flickering above us. It felt like a dark omen. My life as I knew it was being erased in a damp, purple-lit alley while the man I loved was probably counting his profit. I tried to pull away. I tried to use the weight of the dress to anchor myself. Luca didn't even break his stride. He stopped only when we reached his matte black SUV. He turned me around, forcing me to look at the discarded limo. "Don't look for a hero, Sienna," he whispered into my ear. "The man who bought your ring is the same man who signed the bill of sale for your life. From this moment on, you belong to the Varelli family." He opened the door and gestured to the dark interior. "Get in. We have an empire to run, and your husband just gave me the key to his front door." I didn't scream. I didn't fight. I stepped into the car, leaving the white silk of my old life behind in the dirt. Julian thought he was getting rid of a debt, but he just gave me to the only man capable of teaching me how to destroy him. The gates of Luca's estate didn't creak. They slid open with a hiss of hydraulics. The house wasn't a mansion. It was a fortress of glass and obsidian, perched on a cliffside overlooking the city. Inside, there were no guards shouting, no weapons being drawn, just silence. A clean, controlled silence that felt more dangerous than a gun to the head. Luca led me through a hallway lined with monitors, his footsteps echoing on the marble. "You can take the dress off now, Sienna," he said, not looking back. "The performance is over." I clutched the tattered silk of my bodice. "I'm not a performer. I was a bride." Luca stopped and finally turned. The blue light from the security screens washed over his face. "You were a distraction," he corrected. "And you were very good at it." He led me into a room filled with floor-to-ceiling glass. In the center was a single, sleek desk. Luca pulled out a digital tablet and swiped it toward me. Julian told you he was a venture capitalist, right? I nodded, my throat dry. He built tech startups. He was successful. Luca tapped the screen. A video began to play. It wasn't a boardroom. It was a dark warehouse. There was Julian, my Julian, standing over a man tied to a chair. Julian wasn't smiling. He wasn't charming. He looked bored. He checked his watch, the same gold one I gave him for our anniversary, and then nodded to a man in the shadows. A gunshot rang out. The video cut to black. Julian doesn't build startups, Sienna, Luca whispered. He builds debt. And when his debt with my family got too high to ignore, he offered me the one thing he knew I wanted. I stared at the black screen, my world fracturing. Why would you want me? I whispered. I don't know anything about your world. Luca walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. My sister Isabella disappeared 2 years ago. She was working as a junior accountant for Julian's firm. He turned back to me, his eyes burning with a controlled rage. She vanished the day she found the ledger Julian was using to launder money for the syndicate. The last person she was seen with was you. I felt the air leave my lungs. I've never met an Isabella. I've never even been to Julian's office. I know, Luca said, stepping into my space. Because Julian made sure you were always busy. He curated your life like a museum exhibit. But you were the only person Isabella ever managed to contact. She hid something with you, Sienna. Something Julian is willing to sell his own bride to find. Luca reached out, but he didn't grab me this time. He placed a small, silver flash drive on the desk between us. Julian thinks you're a liability. He thinks you'll crack under pressure and tell him where Isabella's files are. I looked at the drive, then at the man who had stolen me from my own wedding. But I think you're a weapon, Luca continued. He's going to come for you. He's going to play the hero, the distraught fiancé. And when he does, you're going to give him exactly what he deserves. I looked down at my ruined wedding dress. The white lace was stained beyond repair, just like my memory of Julian. I reached out and picked up the drive. Tell me what I need to do, I said. Luca's hand hovered near mine, the first sign of a bond that shouldn't exist. First, he said, we take off that dress. You're not a bride anymore. You're a ghost. A maid was sent to my room. She didn't speak, just laid a garment bag on the edge of the king-sized bed and left a pair of heavy fabric scissors on the nightstand. I stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror. The wedding dress was a disaster. Mud from the alleyway painted the hem, and the intricate lace bodice was torn. It felt like I was wearing a corpse. I picked up the scissors. The first cut was the hardest. The sound of tearing silk echoed in the quiet, sterile room. But with every piece of fabric that fell to the floor, my breathing got a little easier. I wasn't just cutting away a dress. I was cutting away the naive girl who thought Julian Gilbert was a savior. I opened the garment bag. Inside was no delicate lace. It was a tailored, obsidian black suit, sleek, sharp, and intimidating. When I looked in the mirror again, the crying bride was gone. Staring back at me was a woman ready to burn an empire to the ground. I didn't just look like I belonged in Luca's world. I looked like I was born to rule it. I walked back into Luca's glass-walled study. He was pouring a drink, but he stopped mid-motion when he saw me. For a fraction of a second, the cold, calculating mafia boss vanished, replaced by a man struck completely silent. "The black suits you," he finally murmured, handing me a glass of amber liquid. "I need to know about Isabella," I said, ignoring the drink. "If she hid something with me, I need a memory to trigger it." What was she wearing the last day you saw her? Luca's jaw tightened. A silver trench coat. She always wore a vintage silver watch. My blood ran cold. The watch. 2 years ago, Julian had thrown a massive charity gala. A frightened, exhausted-looking girl in a silver trench coat had bumped into me in the coat room. She had slipped a vintage silver watch into the pocket of my designer clutch and whispered, "Keep it ticking for me." Julian had confiscated that clutch the next morning, claiming it was ruined. He didn't sell me just to pay a debt. He sold me because he thought I still had the watch. He was terrified I was going to open it. Before I could tell Luca, the security monitors on the wall flared red. A sleek, armored Mercedes had pulled up to the estate gates. Luca's eyes narrowed. Julian didn't come. He sent his hound. "Who?" I asked, my pulse spiking. "Silas," Luca replied, pulling a sleek black pistol from his desk drawer and racking the slide. Julian's right-hand man. The one who pulls the trigger when Julian doesn't want to get his hands dirty. "Stay in the back." "No," I said, my voice surprising even myself. "He's here to see if the merchandise is broken. Let me show him." Luca looked at me, a dangerous smirk slowly forming on his lips. He nodded, gesturing for me to walk ahead of him. The grand doors opened. Silas stepped into the foyer. He was a mountain of a man with a jagged scar across his neck and dead, shark-like eyes. He carried a silver briefcase. "Luca," Silas sneered, his voice like grinding metal. "Julian sent the first installment, and he sent me to check on the bride. Make sure you aren't damaging his property." Silas looked past Luca, expecting to see a weeping, terrified girl in a ruined white dress. Instead, I stepped out from the shadows. My black suit absorbed the light. My heels clicked sharply against the marble. Silas's smirk vanished. "I'm not his property anymore, Silas," I said, stopping just inches from him. I didn't flinch. I didn't shake. "You tell Julian," I whispered, my voice dripping with venom, "that the bride is dead. And if he ever wants to see the contents of that silver watch, he's going to have to come face me himself." Silas's eyes widened. He looked at Luca, who was standing behind me like a lethal shadow, his hand resting casually on his weapon. Silas backed away, his arrogance completely shattered. As the heavy doors closed behind him, Luca stepped up beside me. "Julian is going to panic now," Luca said softly. "Good," I replied, staring at the closed door. "Let him bleed." Julian Gilbert was a man who planned for everything, but he didn't plan for his pawn to bite back. When Silas returned to Julian's penthouse, empty-handed and visibly shaken, the polished veneer of my ex-fiancé finally cracked. Silas delivered my message. "The bride is dead. Come for the watch yourself."
But Miller looked at the timeline. Julian's sudden transfer of funds. The absolute silence from the kidnappers. Miller smiled. "A bitter, crooked thing. She's not a hostage," he muttered to himself, grabbing his worn leather jacket. "She's leverage," and Miller knew exactly where the biggest player in the city kept his leverage. Back at the estate, Luca and I were mapping out the locations of Julian's shell companies. We were going to bleed his accounts dry one by one. Suddenly, the perimeter alarms didn't blare. They just quietly went offline. Luca immediately drew his weapon, pushing me behind the heavy oak door of the study. "Silas?" I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. "No," Luca said, his eyes scanning the security feeds that were flickering back to life. "Silas is loud. This is surgical." The study doors swung open. Standing there wasn't a MAFIA hitman. It was a man in a rumpled suit, holding up a gold detective shield with one hand, his other hand resting dangerously close to his hip holster. "Nice place, Varelli," Detective Miller rasped, stepping into the room. "A bit drafty for a hostage situation, though." Luca didn't lower his gun. "You're trespassing, Miller." And you're out of your jurisdiction. Miller ignored him. His tired eyes found me, taking in the sharp black suit, the lack of handcuffs, and the way I wasn't cowering behind Luca, but standing beside him. Sienna, Miller said, shaking his head. The whole city thinks you're chained to a radiator, weeping for your fiancé. But here you are, playing Bonnie and Clyde with the head of the Varelli family. Julian isn't my fiancé, I said, my voice steady. He's a dead man walking. And if you're here to arrest me for my own kidnapping, you're wasting your time. The private airstrip was a sea of black asphalt and blinding floodlights. A sleek Gulfstream jet sat idling, its engines a low, hungry roar. Silas and 3 of Julian's hired guns were pacing the perimeter. We moved through the shadows of the hangars like smoke. Luca and Victor took the left flank, silenced barrels flickering in the dark. Sound of muffled gunshots and bodies hitting the pavement. The perimeter was clear. I stepped out into the light, wearing a heavy trench coat over my tactical gear. From a distance, in the glare of the floodlights, I looked like a woman in a gown. Silas, I shouted over the engine noise. The massive enforcer turned, a grin of relief spreading across his scarred face. About time. Julian's losing his mind. Get on the plane. He reached out to grab my arm, the same way he had in the alleyway. But this time, I didn't flinch. I swung the suppressed weapon out from under my coat and fired twice. Silas collapsed, his shark-like eyes wide with shock. He was alive, but he wasn't going anywhere. I walked up the stairs of the jet. Inside, the cabin was a palace of leather and gold. Julian was there, frantically typing into a laptop, 2 silver briefcases sitting on the seat next to him. He looked up, a triumphant smile on his face. Sienna, thank God. I knew Luca couldn't keep you. I've settled everything. We're going to. He stopped. He saw the black tactical gear. He saw the blood on my sleeve. He saw the cold, dead look in my eyes. You didn't settle anything, Julian, I said, stepping into the cabin. Luca appeared in the doorway behind me, his weapon leveled at Julian's heart. The Varelli family doesn't take refunds, Luca said. We take interest. Julian backed away, his hands up. Sienna, listen to me. I did it for us. The syndicate was going to kill me. I had to give them something to buy us time. You gave them me, I whispered. And you killed Isabella because she tried to tell me who you really were. Julian laughed, a high, desperate sound. Isabella, you think I killed her for a ledger? No, Sienna, I killed her because she found out about your father. My heart stopped. What about my father? Julian's eyes gleamed with a final, pathetic bit of leverage. Your father didn't leave you that inheritance, Sienna. He left it to me to manage because he knew you were too weak to handle it. I didn't sell you to pay my debt. I sold you so I could legally declare you dead and claim the rest of the estate. I looked at Luca. He didn't look surprised. He looked like he was waiting for me to make a choice. I turned back to Julian. I didn't feel anger. I felt nothing. I reached out and closed his laptop, ending the transfer. You were wrong about one thing, Julian, I said, leaning in close. I'm not the one who's going to be declared dead tonight. Julian looked at the closed laptop, his face pale in the cabin's LED lights. You can't do this, Sienna, he stammered. That money, it's not just mine. If you take it, the syndicate will hunt you to the ends of the earth. I didn't answer him. I grabbed the 2 silver briefcases, the physical keys to his offshore kingdom, and handed them to Luca. Let them hunt, I said, my voice echoing in the small cabin. I'm tired of running anyway. Luca looked at Julian, then at me. We leave him for Miller? I shook my head. No, Miller wants a trial. I want Julian to feel what I felt in that alleyway. Powerless. We left Julian shivering on the floor of his golden jet, his empire digitized and tucked under Luca's arm. But as we hit the tarmac, the sky didn't stay dark. A dozen sets of headlights flared to life at the edge of the runway. The syndicate's backup had arrived. Get in, Luca roared, shoving me into the armored SUV as bullets began to spark off the fuselage of the plane. Victor was at the wheel. He didn't wait for the door to close before he floored it. We weren't just driving, we were weaponizing the vehicle. 3 black sedans pivoted out of the darkness, flanking us as we raced down the long, flat expanse of the runway. Sound of glass shattering and metal grinding. "Sienna, the sunroof!" Luca shouted, tossing me a fresh magazine. I didn't hesitate. I popped the hatch and stood up into the freezing night air. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my skin, but all I could see was the lead car gaining on our bumper. I gripped the weapon, lined up the sights, and pulled the trigger. The lead car's tire disintegrated. It swerved violently, flipping into a spectacular wreck that blocked the path of the others. For a second, I felt a surge of something I'd never known. It wasn't fear, it was command. We blasted through the airstrip gates, fishtailing onto the industrial highway that led back toward the city. The neon lights of the skyline blurred into long, violet and amber streaks. Luca sat beside me, his laptop open, his fingers flying across the keys as he began the process of washing Julian's funds into untraceable accounts. "You're doing it," I said, catching my breath. "We're doing it," he corrected, looking up. But Julian was right about one thing. We can't go back to the estate. It's compromised. So where do we go? Luca looked out at the "Voids" sign as we sped past the warehouse district. Into the shadows, somewhere Julian would never think to look. We pulled into a nondescript underground parking garage in the heart of the financial district. Luca led me to a hidden elevator that required a retinal scan. As the doors opened, I expected another high-tech bunker. Instead, I walked into a penthouse that looked exactly like the one Julian and I had shared, right down to the scent of the lilies on the table. Standing by the window, silhouetted against the moon, was a woman. She turned slowly, her vintage silver watch catching the light. My heart stopped. "Isabella?" I whispered. The dead accountant smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Hello, Sienna," she said. "I've been waiting for you to bring me my money." Luca didn't move. He didn't draw his gun. He just stepped back, leaving me in the center of the room. What happened next, I thought, is the only thing that could ever shock me more than being sold. Couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Isabella, the ghost, the victim, the dead sister, stood 5 feet away from me. She wasn't wearing the silver trench coat from my memories. She was wearing a tailored charcoal power suit. The vintage silver watch on her wrist wasn't a hidden microchip, it was a trophy. I looked at Luca. He was leaning against the doorframe, his weapon holstered, his face as unreadable as a blank screen. "You told me she was dead," I whispered, my voice cracking in the quiet penthouse. "I told you she vanished," Luca corrected, his tone devoid of the warmth he'd shown me in the car. "People only see what they want to see, Sienna. You wanted a savior. Julian wanted a scapegoat." Isabella walked toward me, her heels clicking with a predatory rhythm. "Julian didn't kill me, Sienna. He's too stupid for that. He's just a middleman with a gambling habit and a pretty face." She took the silver briefcases from the table where Luca had placed them. "I'm the one who ran the numbers. I'm the one who leaked the debts to the syndicate to force Julian's hand. I needed him to sell you." Felt a wave of nausea. "Why? What did I ever do to you?" Isabella laughed, a sharp, cold sound. "It's not what you did, darling. It's what you own. Your father's estate was locked behind a blood trust. Julian couldn't touch it while you were alive and sane. But a kidnapped bride? A traumatized victim of the MAFIA? That makes you legally incompetent. And that makes the Varelli family your new legal guardians." I turned to Luca, the man I had started to trust. The man who taught me to shoot. Was any of it real? The training? The airstrip? Luca stepped forward, his eyes finally showing a flicker of something. Guilt, or perhaps just respect for the game. "The training was real. We needed you to survive the night. Julian's panic was real. We needed him to move the money so we could intercept it." He paused, looking at the city lights behind Isabella. "But the plan was always to bring you here. Julian sold you to settle a debt. But we bought you to take the whole kingdom. I looked at the two of them, brother and sister, the architect and the fixer. They hadn't saved me from a monster. They had just traded one cage for a more expensive one. Bonds reflecting in her eyes. Now, Sienna, you have two choices. You can sign the guardianship papers, live in luxury, and let us manage the Varelli-Gilbert merger. You'll have everything you ever wanted, except your freedom. She slid a gold pen across the marble island. Or, I asked, my hand moving slowly toward the pocket of my tactical vest. Luca shifted his weight. He knew what was in that pocket. He was the one who put it there. Or, Isabella said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper, you can go back to that alleyway. And this time, we won't be there to catch you when Julian's men find you. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at the reflection of the voids sign in the window. I realized then that I had been a pawn for too long. I reached out and picked up the pen. But I didn't sign. I looked Isabella straight in the eye and snapped the gold pen in half. You forgot one thing, Isabella, I said, the ink staining my fingers like blood. What's that? She sneered. You taught me how to be a liability, I said, looking at Luca. And a liability always destroys the profit. The black ink from the snapped pen dripped onto the marble island, looking like a fresh wound. Isabella's face contorted from a smug grin to a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. You stupid girl, she hissed. Stepping into my space, you have nothing. No family, no fiancé, and now, no protectors. You're a ghost in a black suit. I didn't blink. I looked past her at Luca. He hadn't moved to help her. He was watching me with a strange, dark curiosity, the same way he had in that alleyway. You're right, Isabella, I said, my voice dropping to a lethal whisper. I have nothing left to lose. And that makes me the most dangerous person in this room. I reached into my tactical vest. Isabella flinched, expecting a gun. Instead, I pulled out a small, black transmitter. The one Miller had slipped into my hand at the estate. Luca taught me how to shoot, I said, looking at him. But Detective Miller taught me how to listen. I pressed the button on the transmitter. A high-pitched tone echoed through the penthouse, followed by a sudden, heavy silence. The lights didn't flicker. They turned a steady, warning red. What did you do? Luca asked, finally stepping away from the door. Miller gave me 48 hours to put Julian in the ground. I said, but I told him if I wasn't back at the safe house by midnight, it meant the Varelli family had taken the money. I just triggered a silent alarm. In exactly 3 minutes, the SWAT teams Miller has been holding back for 3 years will be breaching this building. Isabella lunged for the briefcases, her composure shattered. We have to leave. Luca, get the car. The elevator chimed. The doors didn't slide open. They were kicked off their tracks. Detective Miller stepped out, a shotgun leveled at the ceiling. Behind him, the red lasers of tactical units danced across the expensive furniture and the Varelli siblings. Evening, folks, Miller rasped, his eyes scanning the room. I told you I'd look the other way for 48 hours, Sienna. But I didn't say I wouldn't be watching the clock. Miller looked at the briefcases, then at Isabella. Isabella Varelli, the woman who died 2 years ago. Imagine my surprise to see you looking so vibrant. Luca raised his hand slowly, but his eyes never left mine. He wasn't looking at the cops. He was looking at the woman he had tried to mold into a puppet, only to realize I had become the master. The room was a triangle of lethal intent. Miller had his gun on Luca. Luca had his hand inches from his holster, eyes on Isabella. And Isabella was clutching the briefcases like they were her own life. Give them the money, Isabella, Luca said quietly. It's over. No, she screamed. We spent 2 years on this. Julian was the patsy, she was the key, and you were the muscle. We aren't going to a cell for some jilted bride. Isabella pulled a small, silver pistol from her jacket, the same one Luca had used to train me. She didn't point it at Miller. She pointed it at me. If I don't get the Empire, no one does, she snarled. Luca didn't hesitate. He stepped between us, his back to Isabella, his eyes locked on mine. "Sienna," he whispered, "I told you once that I couldn't let you go. I meant it, but I never said it was because of the money." Sound of a single gunshot echoing through the penthouse. The bullet didn't hit Luca. Miller had fired first, catching Isabella in the shoulder. She collapsed, the silver briefcases bursting open and spilling millions of dollars across the marble floor like confetti. But as the tactical team swarmed the room, Luca didn't run. My father didn't leave the estate to Julian because he thought I was weak. He left the security of the estate to Luca because he knew I was the target. Luca had to let Julian sell me. He had to play the villain to get me away from Julian's reach without the syndicate realizing it was a rescue. Julian wasn't in prison. Not yet. He was back at the private airstrip, trying to convince the ground crew to let him take a smaller prop plane to the coast. He looked up when he heard the click of heels on the asphalt. "Sienna," he gasped, his eyes darting around for a way out. "You're okay, Luca. Did he hurt you?" "I'm so sorry. I was coming for you." I didn't let him finish. I walked up to him and handed him the silver watch. "My father left you a message, Julian," I said, my voice as cold as the rain. Julian fumbled with the watch, his greedy hands shaking as he pried open the back, expecting a payday. He saw the photo, he saw the note, and then he saw the red dot of a sniper's laser center right on his forehead. "Miller is 10 seconds away," I whispered. "But the syndicate is 5. They know you lost their money, Julian. And they know you tried to run." Julian looked at me, truly seeing me for the first time. The bride was gone. The victim was gone. "What do you want?" he whimpered. "I want you to experience the silence," I said. 6 months later. Julian Gilbert is serving consecutive life sentences in a federal facility where the syndicate has a very long reach. He spends every day in fear of the silence. Isabella is gone. Disappeared into the witness protection program after turning on the entire syndicate. And me? I'm standing on the balcony of the Varelli estate. The gates open. A sleek, matte black car pulls up. Luca steps out. He's no longer in handcuffs. Miller had lost the evidence against him in exchange for the syndicate's heads. He walks up the stairs, his eyes finding mine. He doesn't call me property. He doesn't call me bride. "The debt is settled, Sienna," he says, standing beside me. I look out at the city. My father's empire is back in my hands. The Varelli family is my shield. And Julian is a memory. "No, Luca," I say, taking his hand. "The debt isn't settled. We're just getting started. The man who took me saved me. The man I loved destroyed me. And the woman I became, well, she's the one who owns the city now."
Please click the like button, share and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're enjoying this story.